Hi everyone, my name is Alex Denoyer, and today I'll be presenting on two films. Though separated by over 40 years, languages, and countries, echo each other in eerie and powerful ways. Luis Buñuel's Los Olvidados and the Coen brothers' Barton Fink both use surrealist disruption and symbolic settings to critique institutions and explore the inner collapse of their protagonists. Both films center around individuals who are promised support by their societal systems, whether that's the family, the state, or even Hollywood, and are instead crushed by them. Buñuel's Los Olvidados and the Coen's Barton Fink use editing, sound, and mise-en-scène to immerse us in environments that externalize trauma, guilt, and alienation. In both films, surrealism isn't a stylistic flourish, it's a mechanism through which psychological and social breakdown is revealed. Luis Buñuel was a Spanish filmmaker who helped define the surrealist movement. Early in his career, he collaborated with Salvador Dali on films like Un Chien Andalou, which broke cinematic conventions through dreamlike sequences and shocking imagery. Buñuel was deeply anti-clerical and anti-capitalist, and was exiled to Mexico during Franco's dictatorship. It was there in 1950 that he made Los Olvidados, a brutal, unflinching portrayal of street children in Mexico City. This film was initially condemned in Mexico for being anti-national, but it later earned Buñuel Best Director at Cannes, where it was celebrated for its daring mix of Italian neorealism and surrealist critique. The Coen brothers, Joel and Ethan, are American auteurs, known for their dark humor, genre blending, and fatalistic characters. Barton Fink was released in 1991 and won the Palme d'Or at Cannes, as well as Best Director and Best Actor, a rare sweep. The film explores a New York playwright who is lured into Hollywood only to descend into madness in a surreal, decaying hotel. Like Buñuel, the Coens construct psychological spaces, where environment mirrors mind and where narrative logic gives way to anxiety and collapse. In Los Olvidados, we follow Pedro, a young boy living in extreme poverty. After falling under the influence of an older delinquent named Kaibo, he attempts to redeem himself but is continuously failed by every support system: his mother, his school, and state institutions. Barton Fink tells the story of a socially conscious playwright hired by a Hollywood studio to write a wrestling picture. But instead of success, he becomes trapped, both literally in his decaying hotel room and mentally in his writer's block. Both characters are idealistic and vulnerable, and both are slowly consumed by environments that claim to uplift them. In Los Olvidados, Pedro seeks help. He tries to report Kaibo, he tries to stay in school, but every authority, his teacher, his mother, the orphanage, either ignores him or punishes him. In Barton Fink, the Hollywood studio pretends to value his voice, but in reality they commodify and ignore it. Barton's producer lies to him, and his only human connection, Charlie, turns out to be a murderer. Both films expose institutions and depersonalize and discard those who don't conform. These systems act not as saviors, but as indifferent or even predatory forces. Los Olvidados famously includes a surreal dream sequence where Pedro sees the ghost of his mother and floating meat. The sequence breaks from the film's realist tone and enters a psychological space of guilt and longing. Similarly, Barton Fink is filled with surreal touches. The hotel walls sweat, time seems distorted, and the mysterious box Charlie leaves him may or may not contain a severed head. Both films use surrealism not as an escape, but as a rupture in reality, a way to expose what real life hides. As Zavattini said, realism should show things as they are, and both films do that, even when that requires bending reality to reveal internal truth. Buñuel uses gritty street photography and often shoots on location in Mexico City. His camera favors static long takes, particularly during violent moments, forcing us to sit with discomfort. Low-angle shots and deep focus visually emphasize Pedro's entrapment in his environment. In terms of editing, the film is mostly linear and realist, until the dream sequence, which is non-linear, ethereal, and ghostly. Sound design is sparse. Ambient street noise dominates, reinforcing the realism. But during the dream, sound drops out entirely, making the silence feel surreal and haunting. These stylistic choices reflect Buñuel's goal to confront, not comfort, the viewer. The Coens create a vastly different but equally symbolic space. Their use of expressionist lighting with long shadows, symmetrical framing, and dim yellow tones create a dreamlike mood of paranoia. The camera frequently shows long, narrow hallways that trap Barton visually. He's isolated in close-ups or swallowed in wide frames. The editing begins slow, building unease, but when Barton spirals, the pace quickens, especially during the hotel fire. The sound is particularly effective. The humming walls, creaking pipes, dripping ceilings, the hotel seems alive. Sound becomes oppressive, not atmospheric. Charlie's screams during the climax are distorted, blurring reality and delusion. Both films reject traditional narrative resolution. There's no catharsis. Pedro is killed and dumped in a pile of garbage. Barton is left on a beach with no answers. These are stories where the world itself is hostile. Surrealism becomes a lens for moral decay, whether in poverty-stricken Mexico City or corporate Hollywood. In both films, environments are psychic prisons, visual metaphors for repression, guilt, and systemic failure. We can read Los Olvidados through Zavattini's neorealist lens. It shows things as they are, until it doesn't. The dream sequence breaks from the realism, but only to reveal deeper psychological truth. Roca's aesthetic of hunger also fits. Buñuel's film doesn't romanticize poverty. It forces us to feel its raw violence. Barton Fink, meanwhile, reflects Mulvey's idea on collapsing male identity. Barton clings to the illusion of intellectual superiority, but that masculinity and control erode into madness. In both films, style becomes resistance to narrative comfort, to institutional lies, and to false uplift. To conclude, Los Olvidados and Barton Fink both expose how surrealist disruption and stylized environments can critique systemic violence and visualize psychological trauma. Whether through Pedro's dream or Barton's burning hotel, these films immerse us in spaces where trauma is not healed, it is lived in. Their editing, sound design, and camera work don't just illustrate inner collapse, they trap us inside of it. In both films, as I argued earlier, the world isn't misunderstood, it's cruel by design.